Third Eye Thinkers. I'm your host, Megan Benanti.
And I'm Michelle Welch.
Thanks for joining us today. Today we want to talk about how to communicate with spirit. And that's something that, everyone wants to know about. So it's not just Michelle and I, because, we've worked really hard at this. But everybody wants to develop that further in their life.
Right. So when we brought this subject up, I didn't ask you this, but I just assumed that we were talking, when you said communicate with spirit, you were talking about a certain kind of spirit versus spirits that we might think of as like spirits in the home, like hauntings or disincarnate spirits. That's not what we're going to talk about today. That will maybe be another show that might be quite interesting, yep. Right? But today we're talking about spirit in what sense would you say?
The sense that what most people describe as God. And there's many names for that, and so that's one thing that we really want to be open to is that, your terminology is perfect and don't feel that you have to question that. And we're just pick the word spirit because that's a nice, safe word. So.
Right. Some would say source, spirit, source,
Allah.
Higher power. Yes, higher power, Allah, God, whatever that is for you.
Yeah, or quantum physics, if that's
what that is. Right.
So, we each, we brought in a crystal and a plant. So, Michelle, you want to start with your crystal today?
Sure. So today there are so many crystals that will connect us with spirit in different ways. How do we want to connect? Right. So a lot of times, though, if we will go to the blue crystals, first of all, they're very soothing, so they will help us with our meditation, which can help us connect. And then the blue crystals also will help us with our throat chakra, which will help us then kind of speak forth, even if we're speaking in our mind, okay, right. What we talked about last time in our inner eye, inner self, speak forth those things that we want to communicate. So the blue crystals are beautiful for communication with anyone. So, but especially spirit, any of the blues. But I brought a crystal that is known as, and I don't know if you guys can see this. I'm not sure if I'm in the right camera or not, but this is known as celestite or celestite or celestine or celestine. Okay, and it starts with a C. So it's sort of like the celestial bodies, right? And so look how beautiful it is. It is just a gorgeous crystal. They come sometimes in geodes.
Oh, wow.
So we'll have really big ones in the store. I thought about hauling a really big one up here, but then again, no. So I brought this one. And you can see all the little points in it. So every time there's a point, see this one? It's directing energy right at you, Megan, that point.
Thank you.
So everywhere that those points go, they're directing energy. The beautiful thing that we have at Soultopia, and I love these, I haven't seen these a lot of places, but I found them in Tucson, is the tumbled ones. They're actually really, really nice to carry around in your pocket or to even use as a piece of jewelry.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the one for today to help us connect with spirit. But then again, it could just go on and on and on. I mean, never ending with the number of crystals that we could use.
Yeah. Well, and this is such a beautiful color. And for those of you that are just listening and can't see the audio, it's almost like a gray blue. And I just was thinking, God, that would be so pretty in a child's room.
It's gorgeous.
A wall color. So yeah, it's really pretty.
And one other thing I was going to say about that is, so it'll help you connect with spirit. It will also connect with ascended masters, angels, spirit guides. So all those things that come into play when we're trying to connect with spirit, those guides that may help us connect with spirit.
Yep. Okay, good. Good. Yeah. Well, and I chose to do the iris today for a plant. And for most of you, if you're in the Texas area, our irises are already kind of done. But as you go northward, they're either just beginning to bloom or further north, you might still have snow. And the iris was named for the messenger goddess in the Greek mythology. And so, that's the idea of messages. And traditionally, iris represents protection, purification, and wisdom. And so, all of those things are going to be really significant when you are trying to have a conversation with your higher power. And the colors that we think of with iris, if you go back to Van Gogh, it's traditionally going to be that indigos and purples. But there's also white is really prominent, and then there's a multitude of other colors, corals and maroons and oranges, a lot of really cool ones in there. I even have one that's like a maroon color. But if we think about the indigo and the purples, that's going to connect with the third eye, and the whites with the crown chakra. And so that's going to be tying you right back into the idea of opening those areas up so that you feel like you can have a conversation in prayer. And, I want you to think about prayer as, I'm sorry, I'm digressing for a minute, but prayer as being the questions, and then that meditation as being the answers and the time for listening. But going back to the iris, so, we each have this sort of unique spiritual essence that we're trying to tap into. And the more that we can honor and express that, the more that we're going to be on our divine life path. And so the iris is going to help to kind of unify that. So you can use cut irises around you. You can sit out in your garden. The bearded iris doesn't last very long in water. Those are the ones we usually grow in our garden. But there's a multitude of kinds that you can buy in the grocery stores and stuff that will hold their petals longer. But one of the interesting things I was thinking about as I was driving over here with the iris is, if you grow bearded irises, their roots are actually kind of halfway above the ground. They barely sit under the soil, so they actually need some light on that root to grow. And even if you just start with one, they have rhizomes. That's what their roots are called. So they spread through the root system. They don't seed, and so they're kind of creeping along the surface. And you start with one, and you're going to have like 10 within 3 years, and they'll really take over an area. Now they might stop blooming if you don't break them up and divide them. But the idea that we need that light to grow, and sometimes we have to be, in partial darkness, or sometimes we feel like we're in total darkness, and we need that illumination in our life. And so you got to clear off some of that soil on top to allow that light to shine in. So that's why I chose that. If you were interested in any of the references that I kind of was studying from, The Magic of Flowers by Tess Whitehurst, and I also looked at the Encyclopedia of Magical Herbs by Scott Cunningham.
Did you say something about the iris and the
the fleur-de-lis?
Yeah. What did you say about that?
I was telling Michelle earlier, that was something interesting I found out, that the fleur-de-lis actually came from the image of the iris, and that was something that the French kings had developed over time, and it was based on an old story that kind of a folklore story, I guess. But it was really cool to know that. So.
Yeah. One thing that's really interesting to do is to take each week, as we go through these crystals and these flowers or herbs, is if you will start collecting the crystals, and you don't have to have a lot. There's a lot of books that'll tell you need to go get 10 rose quartz and 15 clear quartz, and you're like, okay, forget it, I'm out. I mean, that's great if you want to come buy all those, but you don't need to. Take what you have, and then as those flowers, as you begin to, maybe you're using the flowers, and maybe you're taking them out of the vase, or they're coming out of the yard or whatever, then you can put them in the grid.
Yep.
Okay, so you can start making a crystal grid with these beautiful flowers that we've mentioned and the crystals. You can tie in other things, that you find around, maybe a picture or a candle, but especially the flowers and the crystals are so beautiful together to make a grid.
Yep.
And so you guys, if you ever do it, post on our page, as we post our podcast on our pages, you guys post the pictures of your crystals and your flowers, especially if you have the crystals that we talk about and the flowers that we talk about, because I think that would be really powerful to use those together and to do a grid.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you don't, I mean, if you don't have a garden in your own home and you don't want to buy cut flowers, because, your crystals will last, your cut flowers won't, go to your arboretum or walk down the street. Most likely, especially in if you drive by an old or walk by an old person's home, there's probably going to be irises growing because they do really well with
I don't have
neglect.
any irises, and I
But you're not old.
No, you know what's so funny? To totally digress, I posted this thing. I said, "What is this with all these emails with walk-in bathtubs?" And then everybody started texting me and calling me and putting it on Facebook. Welcome to the, what is it, AARP? They were like,
Yep.
welcome to the whatever club. So apparently I am, because I'm getting these emails on walk-in bathtubs. I was like, okay, I am not ever. I was like, well, I love Luby's and I love bingo. Now I guess I need a walk-in bathtub
Well, it sounds
and
like
some
it's on the list.
irises.
Yep. Yep.
I'm good to go, right?
Absolutely.
I'm in the old people club for sure. But seriously, walk-in bathtubs. But the irises, I have one quick question about that. Are those the ones? Do they have a real strong scent to them?
No, they're not known
What
for
am I
their
thinking?
scent.
I'm thinking of lilies.
Probably so.
Yeah.
Yeah, lilies can be very fragrant, but
Yeah.
irises, they take a lot of abuse, and yeah, you'll find them growing around in like really old cemeteries, old people's homes, young people's homes. They're really easy to share. I've actually rung the doorbell of someone's house and asked if I could take a cutting, a rhizome from their garden. Most people don't mind.
Oh,
So
That's really neat.
yeah, it's kind of cool.
all right. So how do these tie in to, let's just dive right in, how they tie into how we communicate with spirit and how we would, besides crystals and our flowers, which actually I do believe have, or we believe have very high vibration and will help us communicate with spirit. Anything from nature, in my opinion, will. How else do you begin to communicate with spirit?
I just pray. Good old fashioned prayer. I stopped getting on my knees when I was a little kid, or when I stopped attending church regularly. I guess when I still go to church, I'll pray on my knees. But I take moments to have conversations with God, like throughout the day, and certainly every time before I go into a reading or a session with a person. Before I come in here, but I'll also do it before bed, when I wake up, as my kids are going to school. If I feel like someone needs support, I will literally just stop and do it. But it doesn't have to be, a big event. It's just closing your eyes for a moment and taking that moment to listen or to sit, to ask and receive.
To communicate.
Right. And I think people, they get afraid to trust themselves. And I just think, oh, no, it's that first voice you hear. Sometimes you get the answer before you can even formulate the actual question because you're trying to put words to your thoughts. Well, your guides and God, the answer's already there. You just have to trust it. And it's pretty cool when you open that up.
Absolutely. I do agree with you. It's usually that first still small voice. I mean,
Yes.
it's that voice that comes, and then we tend to question it.
Right.
We'll say, oh, that's just my brain telling me that's something else. But let's go back to that about what you said about prayer as the question and then meditation as the answer.
Yes. And, that's a lot of times it's easy for us to ask, but it's not easy for us to listen. And that's one of the key things that we need to bring in. A lot of people love yoga and because they're listening to their body. And then to me, though, the Shavasana is the part that I can't wait for because that's when I can just stop and listen to whatever comes through. And that's always a really great experience for me to see what shows up then. But the listening...
I love it, too, because that's when I can just lay down.
Yeah.
No,
It's when you're done.
I do listen, but I also love it. They're like, and not everyone, take time for this last pose. You really need to. I'm like, no problem. I'm here for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
You just guys go on, but this is my favorite pose.
Yeah.
No, seriously.
Well, and I always
really
wonder
enjoy
about
it.
the people who run out during that pose. And
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, man, you are missing out. That's the good
So
stuff.
missing out.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, So when you're communicating, how does that work for you?
The same, somewhat the same, I
Okay.
will say. For me, and I'm going to address the prayer. I do call it prayer. I think we can call it many things. We can call it setting of intention. I believe when we're setting an intention, we'll hear that phrase a lot. Set your intention. To me, that's a form of a prayer.
Absolutely.
Okay? If you really are mindful and you're setting an intention and you believe that intention is going somewhere, right?
Yep.
To your higher self, whether it be your higher self that's connected to God or to source, and whatever you personally believe on that, that setting of intention to me is a form of a prayer. So I even believe that in, let's say, crystal grids or things that we were talking about earlier, that is a setting of intention, which is actually to me a form of prayer. And so in that way, again, it doesn't have to be a way that somebody else teaches you to do a prayer. It can be the way that you feel that is comfortable to you, like you said. You
Yeah.
know, there's no right way to do it. It's just that communication. So I do agree with that, and I like how you said the meditation is the listening to get the answer, because I think a lot of people skip that part, or they skip the asking. They go straight to the meditating.
Right.
And so I really hadn't thought about it the way you put it. So I really like that. Another way I think is through some of the tools we use,
Oh,
besides the
absolutely.
crystals and the flowers, the cards,
Mm-hmm.
to get us in touch. You know, maybe if we're just having a little, and I'm not going to say that we use cards every time just because we're struggling. Okay, some people will say that. I'm just going to address it. Some people will be like, well, I can get in touch with spirit. I don't need cards. And they'll be
Right.
almost have a little ego in that.
Mm-hmm.
I love the tools. I love
Yeah.
crystals. I love cards. I love the pendulum. I like toys, I guess, you know, and
Right.
I'm not saying they're to be toyed with, but I like them.
Right.
They're fun, they're pretty, they're interesting to me. So I think that's another way to get in touch with spirit, is to use our cards.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have no problem. When I have a question, I'll ask my cards, because I don't want my own head to get in the way. And but there's not. Yeah, we do. There's a lot of things we are picking up on as intuitive people, and so yes, some people might prefer not to use cards. I love cards. I love pictures. I was a kid who you my mother had to wait on me in the museum because I was the last one out. I was always just staring in awe, and I didn't know that was going to develop into staring at pictures of cards, but that's what it became.
Yeah.
So,
And you know, I think, and you're an artist. I mean, you,
try.
well, you are. I think everyone's an artist.
In my own
but
right.
you actually do paint. And I think another cool thing is, just kind of as an aside, when you do go to the museums or you do look at a work of art, you can, instead of what did, reading what the person wanted it to mean, you're actually doing almost an intuitive reading, like an
Yeah.
oracle card, when you step back from that picture and you say, what can I see in this? That literally is a way that I teach people to read. You can actually, go to a museum and look at those pictures or flip through books and just get a picture and just what pops out at you and what do you see?
Right.
Yeah.
I love that you say that because actually, in my when I took an intuitive tarot class, I had studied books for about 3 years, and then I took a class by Farrell Humphrey up in New York, although she was in Dallas at the time. And she said, "All right, look at the picture and tell me what you see." And I was like, "Oh my God, that's it! That's all I have to do." And then I was like, and the whole reading just came out, and
Just
it was that aha moment for me. I just needed that one bit of permission, so
Right.
that was really cool.
I think another way, briefly, that I get in touch with spirit and source for me, God for me, is I do believe we are given angels. You can call them angels. You can call them guides. They could even be animal totems or power animals, spirit animals, if you want to call them that, to help guide us. I'll say, for me, and this is a bigger subject than today, but I'll just briefly say that my journey now is taking me that they are guides. They are there to guide me to my higher self that is connected to source. So they're not there to be a replacement for that for me, but they're a guide. They still allow me to have my free will to connect with source, which also still allows me to have my free will. So, those guides also come into play in connecting with spirit.
Oh, absolutely. And free will is something that I want everybody to really embrace in this process. It's because even when you're working with a psychic and they say, oh, I see this in your future, that's the direction you're headed based on kind of where you're at in that moment. And you still have free will. Like if it's not looking great, hopefully your intuitive person is guiding you to work in a better direction.
And course correction.
Yeah. A course correction. Beautifully.
Course correction.
Yeah, that's beautifully said.
Yes, I love that. So I think that, as far as getting in touch with the spirit guides, there was something else I was going to say with the animal totems. I know. Also, I think spirit can reveal and we can communicate with spirit. This is more spirit communicating with us, I would say. The other way is through signs.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
Symbols.
Yes.
You know, once we start noticing them, and if we ask, show me, just give me a sign. And even maybe say what you want the sign to be. I actually have a friend, she has a book, Keep Searching for Blue Jays. It's Barb Chevalier. And her son was actually the victim of a shooting by a wannabe serial killer back around the time of the Virginia Tech shooting. So it was in Frisco, and he, I'll let you read the book. It's so powerful. But he came to their home and he shot her 14-year-old son. Now, I will tell you that he did survive, and had messages when he came back. But the reason it's called Keep Searching for Blue Jays is because that was her sign from God. She had asked for signs, and then she saw blue jays everywhere. And then she started to see cardinals. So that's another way.
Oh, wow. Yes. And it's so important. I actually will tell my clients after reading, that when you pray, ask for a sign and ask for direction and things to look for, and then pay attention to those.
Pay attention.
Yeah.
Do we have time for a reading? Are we going to get one of those?
Yes. Let's look at our reading. So we had people post on our Facebook pages questions. So these are the two that I pulled out already. So Deborah's question is a good one. It says, how do I better develop my own intuition? Is there a process I can use?
Okay.
So that ties in with what we've just talked about today. But let's see what the cards say on that. Okay. And again, we've put intentions out on our cards earlier. Oh, and I guess you get to hear that shuffling, don't you?
I like the sound of shuffling. So
yes,
that's fine.
Do too. Okay, so let's see what we've got for Deborah. And then hopefully we'll have time for this other reading as well. So we'll do this kind of quick. Okay, so this card, this deck is called the Star Tarot by Kathy McClelland.
It's beautiful, by the way.
Really, really beautiful. And she's hand painted every card. So that's also kind of really neat. Michelle, why don't you start?
Okay, I'm immediately drawn over here, and I am just going to be drawn to the pictures right now, like we said, okay? Even though this is a tarot deck. She asked how she could better develop her intuition. I see things coming to you in threes. I actually would say, what's her name, Deborah?
Yes.
Deborah, I would say literally, first, a lot of people think in order to connect that they need to be ungrounded. I'm going to dispel that myth. You can be highly connected in your crown chakra, but I believe, need to be grounded at the same time, okay? You can do both, okay? Yep. So we don't have to be all, just loopy to connect with our intuition. So that's the first thing. So ground and especially afterwards for you, I want you to ground. But I get these three, and these to me, it's kind of interesting. They look like those big old timey curlers.
Yes, I do.
Okay, so for some reason, that's just leading me to listening, the thing that we said about listening, because I feel like you already connect with your intuition a lot more than you may realize, Deborah. And so, and a lot of people do. So I think for you, now it's going to come in the form of meditation and listening that we spoke about before.
Yep. And what I was seeing, it's confirming what you're saying too. We're looking at Knight of Pentacles in reverse, Eight of Cups in reverse, and Three of Pentacles. And there's a lack of grounding right now for her. And she's kind of been floating around like in her head, but not necessarily getting out of her head and connecting spiritually. So, tap down some, mental and emotional roots into the earth and do your prayers and then do some real listening. Mm-hmm. So let's jump into the next one real quick, and then we'll be out of time. So the other question that I pulled out, sorry. All right, it's from Sadie. I'm having a difficult time staying focused in life, from daily tasks to my overall goals. I feel like I need some grounding force to help me find direction. Do you have any suggestions for the mind and body? Any crystals I can keep close, essential oils, or suggestions? I feel so disconnected from the earth on a regular basis. It's like I'm just flying furiously through life. And God, I bet a lot of people feel that way.
Smoky quartz. Okay, I'm going to go while you're shuffling. I'm going to just go ahead if you don't mind.
No, go for it.
Smoky quartz, Sadie. Is it Sadie?
Yes,
Sadie. Smoky quartz. And I would say for you, hematite and potentially some lodestone. Lodestone's very grounding. It's not beautiful, but it's very grounding.
Okay.
I'm sorry, lodestone. That's kind of mean to the lodestone, but
well, everything has a purpose.
And oil.
Well, I just found one yesterday called Anger Management, and that could be a really good one if you're trying to dispel some of those negative feelings.
There you go.
So that's by Windmere, and they carry it over at Natural Grocers, and I think they probably still carry it at Whole Foods.
And black tourmaline actually absorbs and deflects negativity. So pretty much everybody needs black tourmaline. Just going to tell you, just straight up.
Okay, Miss Sadie. So we've got King of Wands, Four of Wands in reverse, and Two of Wands. What are you drawn to instantly?
It's weird. Here's the interesting thing. Nothing. I am all over the place with you. So I'm feeling your Sadie, the energetic lack of focus. So I feel you probably here the most. I do feel like there are reasons right now that you're kind of all over the place. The focus is, I feel like you're being pulled in some different directions. Mm-hmm. You have a lot of ideas, and they're really good ideas, but you're having trouble implementing them because of that lack of grounding. And here's the beautiful thing. You already know that there's the lack of grounding. So if you implement some of these things we said, and yoga, tree pose, some of those grounding poses too into your life, I think then you'll be able to focus in on some of these great ideas you have that are just, that's why you're all up here.
All up there.
Do you feel that?
Well, and I'm feeling too that her, there's a lot of creative energy that needs to be expressed, and you're used to being in the leadership role and really being an alpha and very dominant. And it's interesting, but there's two here. There's two lions here. We've got two bear cubs, and we've got two wands. And so there's constantly a dynamic of these two little beings kind of interacting with each other, but they're not necessarily connecting. And so if you've got things going on with in the family dynamic, I feel like everybody's kind of pulling in different directions. And so maybe part of that isn't related to you, but your outside influences coming
Good
in.
point.
And because I'm seeing Sadie as being the king here. And so, it clearly it's going to be getting the focus around the family. And honestly, the other stuff seems really frivolous to me. So if you're working, work is what you seem to really love, but you're not able to focus on. And because I feel like that's the sun, but it's in the background. And there's too many other things that are taking priority
That
right
are
now.
distracting and pulling. It's a push-pull
Yeah.
and pulling her from what she's really wanting to focus on.
Yeah.
But again, her question, she knows
Right.
already.
Right. Yeah. It was really phrased interesting, because I was like, it sounds like she knows she already knows the answer. She just needs confirmation.
Well, you know, they say sometimes if you know the question, you know the answer. You
Oh,
just
yeah?
sometimes need it expressed. So you kind of you have this inner knowing. But I love how you saw these twos.
Yeah.
And I do feel that there's probably some push pull. Do you feel it that way?
Yeah.
Or
Because
the outside influences.
right. Well, here they're kind of like, "Rrr," and there they're going in different directions, and here they're uniting. But it's just a lot of to me, there's a lot of emotions going in there. So,
Yeah.
and not enough individual time for self recovery and exploration.
And reflection. Yes. I see that too.
So,
Ah.
all right.
Okay.
Cool.
Well, thank you, Sadie and Deborah.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you for your questions, ladies.
And so we are about out of time. I want to thank Megan for bringing the mint for our water today. That's another plant that we had today.
Yep.
It's been wonderful. And we will see you guys next week. And until then, keep third eye thinking.
Absolutely. Thank you.